Thank you, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. I'm Trudy Coxe, the host of a special edition of Inside the Newport Mansions. And as many of you know, this is the 100th anniversary of the publication of The Great Gatsby. And back in 1973, a movie version of the classic F. Scott Fitzgerald novel, which starred Robert Redford, Mia Farrow, and Sam Waterston, among others, was made in Newport, with scenes filmed at Rosecliff and at Marble House. Today, we have three great guests joining us to share some of the memories from the legendary moment that took place in 1973, a legendary moment in Rhode Island film history. Paul Del Nero and Nannie White Talbott Brown were extras during the filming of The Great Gatsby. And Paul Neivert is the husband of the late Arthur Richter, who was also an extra, and all three have great memories. So welcome to the Newport Mansions. I am very excited to reminisce with all three of you about this remarkable experience. And we will start, Paul, perhaps with you with the first question. What motivated you to become an extra in the film?
Well, my father was in the film. My father and I were in the orchestra. And it was 1973. I had just graduated from high school. I was 18 years old. And I was a budding musician at the time. And my father was in the union. And they reached out to my father to be in as an extra. My father was actually the bass player in the orchestra that you see in the movie. Ooh. And he said, well, I played trombone in high school at the time. So he said, well, now you're going to be in the movie also, but you have to join the union. So I joined the Musicians Union in 1973, and that was my way into The Great Gatsby.
And you've been a member of the union ever since?
I have been. Yeah, music became my career. I'm still a musician. I'm a bass player now, actually. Also, I went on to Berklee College of Music and did my undergraduate there. I did a master's at New England Conservatory. And then I did 28 years on the faculty at Berklee College of Music. I just retired a few years ago.
Wow, so you're a very distinguished musician, Paul. Just being associated with Berklee is a very positive thing. So that experience really impacted you, not just personally, but professionally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, at that time, graduating from high school, my summer job was going to be I was going to be a stonemason working on the cobblestones on Brick Market, not Brick Market, but Bowen's Wharf. All of those cobblestones came from Thames Street, and they were all piled up in clumps cemented together. And this was my job, was going to be for the summer, was to, with a mason's hammer, chip and clean cobblestones. And we knew nothing about laying cobblestones. And so we had a string and a level, and we were just laying a pile of sand, and we were just figuring out how to lay cobblestones. And I did that for, I think, a couple of weeks, and then the thing for The Great Gatsby came.
You were saved.
I was saved.
You were saved, and I bet it was a hot summer, and it couldn't have been the worst time to have to lay those cobblestones.
Oh, it was hard labor, literally.
Now, Paul, I'm going to stretch your memory. Somebody here at the Preservation Society was also in the orchestra, and he is our director of special events. Yeah. And his name is Philip Pelletier. Do you, by any chance, know him or remember him?
I absolutely do. And I had met Phil before that. I had played, again, I was playing trombone back then, and I used to play in I think it was like a community orchestra, a concert band. And it used to rehearse, I remember, at Thompson High School. And Phil played baritone in that orchestra. And that's when I first met Phil. And then I went on to know Phil later on, because I remember he booked a lot of the music in the Mansions, and I did a lot of that playing with other people that were actually in the Gatsby, in the orchestra. Mac Kripkala was one, and Jack Warner. And the funny thing about that was that Jack, especially, he was a very good drummer, but in the movie, because we were extras, he actually ended up holding a saxophone, because it wasn't actually recording us. It was just, we were just, pretending we were playing.
Oh my, I didn't know that. Well, Philip claims that he ended up on the on the cutting room floor, but I've watched The Great Gatsby and you do see him for a second. So I think he should claim,
Yeah.
he was in it. He can get
Yes.
away with that.
Yeah.
Philip, I don't know if Nannie, you knew him.
No.
Peter might not have, but he does remember your father, Nannie.
Oh,
And he was also, as you said, Paul, teaching at Thompson Rogers. And he knows, I mean, there are so many people still to this day, oh, you were my teacher.
mm,
It still happens today that people all around town know Philip Pelletier. And you have, I'm going to ask this question of all of you. Let's talk to you next, Nannie. Tell us about your connection, and then we'll go to Peter and ask you about the connection you have to the Great Gatsby. And I love your backdrop, Peter. That's just great. But we'll start with Nannie first.
well, my father was the executive director of the Preservation Society of Newport County. And I was a young mom with two young daughters. And Dad let me know that there was a casting call for extras. And I was only at that time in my life somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, or somebody's mother. So the idea that I could maybe be an extra in the Gatsby was very intriguing to me.
And with Robert Redford.
Right, and Mia Farrow and Sam Waterston. Anyway, so that's how I
And
did it.
so did you try out? You had to go through
I don't remember a tryout per se, other than a look at.
Ah.
They sort of checked me out and I believe took measurements. And that's really all I remember, other than at the time, my hair was, which was quite common at that time, in a kind of a flip at my shoulders. And they said, oh, you're going to have your hair cut. And because we're going to give you a guiche curl, which means you have to have your hair cut right at the tip of your jawbone near your ear.
Right.
So we can paste it on your cheek, which I did.
Oh, you mean it curled around at the ear?
It didn't curl around the ear. It just came forward and curled up on my cheek. And
Oh, I see.
And, up until that time, my hair had been, sort of shoulder length or a bit longer. After that, I grew my hair, as you can see.
And did you make it into the final version?
Yes, yes.
Oh, good.
So I did do all 10 nights and loved it. I absolutely loved it.
And you can still go back and watch The Great Gatsby and see yourself.
Actually, I can't. We actually have a DVD of The Great Gatsby, and we invited some friends over on Saturday night and they were all excited. Oh my gosh, we're going to see you. We're going to see you. And I actually think I remember where I was just coming into the ballroom, and I would have been the next face you would have seen, but it's so often the case, as I think our other guests will attest, you're just wallpaper. You're nobody. You're just wallpaper and sort of the texture that says this is a party and there are a lot of people there.
And you must have had a costume that they fitted you to.
Yes,
you wore every day.
I wore it every night and had to be very careful with it. And my recollection is that I was told that it was a period costume and it was all beaded. I mean, heavy and beaded and quite extraordinary to be able to wear this amazing dress.
Wow.
And at one point, they also were looking for people to have cigarette holders. And earlier in my teenage years, I had smoked cigarettes for a couple of years. And so I raised my hand and said, oh, I'd love to have a cigarette holder. And they said, do you smoke? And I said, oh, no, I don't smoke anymore. And they said, nope, no cigarette holder for you.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry. And
But
today you could be smoking those fake cigarettes that put the smoke out into the air.
yeah, well, I guess. But the other thing that I recall, and maybe my memory, 52 years is wrong, but I believe Paramount actually had special cigarettes made that had the name of the brand, I think, that went horizontally on the cigarette as opposed to around it. I mean, details like that were amazing to me, that they would go to those lengths.
Yeah. And Peter, what is your association? I know your former husband was
Yes,
an ex.
it's not direct, but my husband, Arthur Richter, was an extra in The Great Gatsby. And he was a successful businessman in Providence. And but his family was in the film industry. They had theaters throughout Rhode Island in those days. I don't think any of them exist anymore. And he also was a theater hound. His brother-in-law once said he'd go to the opening of an outhouse if it had a marquee over it. Film and theater was in his blood. So anytime that he heard about a film coming to Rhode Island, he tried to be an extra in it. And did in many of the films that were done here in Rhode Island, and Great Gatsby was one of them. And I don't know a lot of the details about how that came about, but he did tell me that when he went down to be interviewed, that he really wanted to be in one of the party scenes. He was an excellent dancer and he hoped to be in one of the party scenes, but he was told he was too ethnic looking, which I don't believe he's ethnic looking. I don't know what that meant, especially in those days. But anyway, so he was cast as a chauffeur. I don't know what happened to these pictures. I tried to look for them for this interview, but I couldn't find them. I don't even know if they still exist, but I do recall seeing pictures of him in that costume. And I watched the film through a couple times, and I could not see him in it until maybe the very last scene of the film. There's a group of chauffeurs in the distance of the party scene, and he was very, very tall. So I suspect he was the tallest person in that group of chauffeurs, but that's all I recall seeing him. He apparently was filmed in other parts, and I think he even had a few tiny speaking parts, but those were cut from the file.
Oh dear.
I
Well,
think he said was often the case with the filming.
the trials and tribulations of being a walk-on, I think. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, what kinds of mementos or photos or keepsakes do any of you have? And maybe we'll start with you, Peter, because right behind you is a visual memory of the film. So why don't you tell us what you're sitting in front of?
I don't really know how it was used. It's a placard that says The Great Gatsby on it, a picture of Rosecliff and Paramount Pictures. And I suspect it was something that was just around the filming site to mark the boundary of it, or I don't really know. And I don't even know how my husband came across it, but I suspect it was just lying on the ground at the end of filming because there's a faint footprint on it. But it's one of those things. He was very sentimental, and he kept it. And as I was going through things in the house, I found this and thought it might be a great thing for the Newport Preservation Society to have.
Oh, I think it's just spectacular. It really is. And it's actually a pretty good drawing, if it is a drawing, of Rosecliff, not too far off. So when you all saw the final film, Paul, do you have any mementos or photos or keepsakes?
I do have one photo of the orchestra kind of posed just there on the bandstand. We're all in white tails, and it's a night scene. My father was an amateur photographer, and I've recently come across that because I have boxes of slides. I probably have a couple of thousand slides that I'm trying to scan and digitize. And I did come across a picture of the orchestra. That's the only thing I
Oh.
have, though, is that one picture.
And what about you, Nannie? You have some great stories of your father loaning, I guess, some furniture to the
Right.
making of the film.
Right. We had moved from a rather large house to a smaller house in Middletown. And so we stored some of that furniture. I think it was in the Elms. And the Paramount was looking for furniture for Nick's house. And I guess Dad showed him this rattan kind of furniture that was sort of porch furniture, and that's what they used. And now it's our porch furniture.
And tell the audience too about the grass.
Oh, when they were building Nick's house, because there is no building there, when they were building Nick's house and putting in the lawn, they actually planted weeds in the lawn to make it look rough. And there is even that little scene where Gatsby has the lawnmower guy come and mow the lawn because he wants it to look better than it did. And when they were building the house, I went over with my father, and they had, when they were painting the house, they painted the house with some kind of quick drying paint that made the paint crackle and look distressed, which was amazing
Of course.
to see. Right, weeds in the grass and crackly paint on a brand new house. And as I recall, there were actually walls that moved, so cameras could get in and photograph a scene from a different direction. That's my
And
memory.
where was that house located in
Let's
Newport?
see, if you are looking at the water from, this is my recollection, if you're looking at the water from the terrace of Rosecliff, it would be on your left.
Uh-huh.
That's how I remember it.
You do, Paul. Good.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
we're putting the pieces
Phew.
of, was it close to the water or was it close to the house? Or halfway down the lawn?
I would say it was sort of equidistant. Would you
Yeah.
agree, Paul?
Yeah, it was
Between the house and the
down on
water.
left, like probably like a 45-degree angle off of
Yeah,
the
right.
terrace. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it was actually situated the way it was depicted in the film.
Uh-huh,
Not
exactly. Yep. Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
they
that's
didn't have to.
interesting. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So when you all saw the final film, how did it compare to your experience on set? Paul?
Well,
Well, to learn that there was no real music being played is certainly a revelation. You didn't know you were such a great musician?
Well, no. I knew that's. I mean, that was. It was interesting the way it was done because it would be like a studio orchestra that would perform all of the music. I knew that going in, so I knew we were just gonna. I had no idea actually how it was gonna work, but how it did work was that there were speakers hidden around the stage, and they would play music. There would be music piped in that would be to the tempo that the dancers needed around the pool. If you remember that big party around the pool and all that. So they would turn that music on, and you were instructed just to pretend you're playing music at this particular tempo. So you'd be doing the drummer would be, well, my father would be like this, and and then they do a slower thing, so you'd play at that tempo. And then I'm sure that was that would go back to Hollywood, and the studio orchestra, they would just drop the music in that way. But the way when you look at when I see the movie, I mean, you can see me for like a split second. My father's pretty visible because he's standing up with the bass. So every time the camera goes across the party and the orchestra's in front of you, you can see my father pretty well at times. Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting aspect of how a movie was made. I mean, like I said, I was 18 years old. I had no idea. I was
Right.
just following directions at that point.
So what was a typical day like on set for you two? And if, Peter, if you have memories of what your husband told you, I'm interested to hear them. I know they filmed, was it for 22 days? Is that right?
I remember 10.
10
It was
days,
10 for
okay.
me also.
Okay, well then 10, I stand corrected. Well, tell us about, how the day started and how it proceeded forward. And Kate Pedersen, who is the woman who does all of our education programming, figured out how much you all got paid in a day, which I'll share with you later. But tell us how a typical day went for you.
Should I go first, Paul?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, my recollection is that I would drive to Salve Regina College, or now is it university. Anyway, that's where makeup and costumes and hair were done. And I would arrive at 5 and
5 a.m. or
no,
5.
5 p.m. because these are all through the night. They aren't during the day.
Yeah.
And when you see the movie, there's only, I think, one quick scene of the dawn, and we would work all night until 7 in the morning. And,
Wow. So you were working 14-hour days.
well, I would have paid Paramount to have the opportunity, to be fair. It was really, as Paul mentioned, it was just really interesting because you don't really understand how much goes into doing a film and all the background stuff that has to happen. And I do remember when the director or assistant director we would get a break every once in a while they were adjusting things for a scene. And then the director would have his little, whatever you call that little microphone kind of thing. And he would say, "First marks, please." And, we'd go back to wherever it was we were. And always Mia Farrow and Robert Redford and would always be on their first mark immediately. We never had to wait for them.
Wow.
Some of the other actors were a little more nonchalant. We'd have to sort of wait till they got to their first mark. But Mia Farrow and Robert Redford were so professional and right there.
And Paul, I guess, were you on set all the time as the orchestra, or only for the scenes where music was needed?
So, yeah, my day or night was like, it was like basically like you'd be there in your white tails at 6, and you'd be in a tent as you're facing Rosecliff to there was a big tent on the left side. There were several tents over there, and I think that was the staging area where all of the stuff came in. I mean, there was another interesting thing to me as a kid was watching this happen was like every party scene, the buffet would roll out. And it was an elaborate buffet, and there'd be like a pig with an apple in its mouth, and there'd be like all kinds of fish and everything, and a massive amount of stuff. But it was the same at the end of at 6 in the morning, they'd roll it all back into a freezer, and then 6 o'clock the next night they'd roll the same stuff back out again. And go, whoa, this is kind of weird to me anyway. But
It was real food,
like,
not rubber food.
No.
Yeah, right. Don't eat the food. Just look at
Yeah, they were very explicit. Do not take any of this food. It is not edible. And I think it had been sprayed. Do you remember that, Paul? That it looked kind of a little shiny and
yes.
So we never touched the food.
I do recall
Yeah,
Arthur.
it
I do recall Arthur saying it started to smell pretty bad by the end of the film.
I think
was-
so.
I don't remember
Yeah,
that at all.
it was a little peculiar. But,
Well,
for the orchestra, I'm sorry.
just to remind you, you may or may not, but Kate got this information together for us. You were paid $1.65 per hour, which was $19 per day. And that would be the equivalent of $143.68 today. So you were really working for cheap.
Well, I have to say that because I was in the union, this was an issue. It's like they had
Oh,
to hire musicians at a union rate for that. I mean, it wasn't like we were being paid to play, but they had to hire. This was an issue actually.
Yeah.
Now that I remember talking about this, is that they had to hire union musicians for the orchestra. So
Yeah.
I remember because it was like, again, it was either like work on a rock pile or be in a movie. And I can remember that I made like $650 for the 10 nights, which was like enough to get me through the rest of the summer. Actually, is how that worked out.
And how would you describe the overall atmosphere on the set and during filming? Was it chaotic? Was it glamorous? Was it tedious? Was it dull? Was it fun? What was the atmosphere?
Well, again, I was 18. I was a little kind of antsy, and my night went like we sat in that tent more than we actually were up on the bandstand. And literally, you'd sit there for hours, and then all of a sudden you'd get a call, and they would rush you out onto the bandstand, and you would pretend you're playing for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then it'd be okay, and then back to the tent where you sat. So it was tedious. It was, I mean, it was a little, it was not really, it wasn't a grind, but it was like, it's like you sit around and do nothing, and then all of a sudden you're like very active for just a short period of time.
Right. Peter, do you remember anything from your husband's
Yeah,
stories?
I don't recall him talking much about the routine of everyday filming, but his favorite recollection was after filming one day, and Arthur was not a retiring person. He would engage anybody, is sitting with Robert Redford and Mia Farrow talking about that day's filming, sitting on the ballroom floor talking with them.
wow.
So
Wow.
I don't recall specifically what he talked about, but what he said they talked about, but I'm sure he would have engaged them. That was his personality.
And Paul and Nannie, did you have any interactions with Redford or Farrow or Waterston?
No.
I might have had a slight introduction to Sam Waterston. There's a sort of a vague memory of that, mostly because I became friends with his mother, who was also an extra. And I think he came over and just she introduced me, I think. But no, I didn't have any personal interaction with any of the actors. I do remember my family belonged to Bailey's Beach Club. And I remember Robert Redford swimming in the swimming pool, which had a lot of chlorine, and worrying because it looked like his hair was getting a little green from the chlorine. But when I looked at the film, his hair looked perfect. So I guess makeup knew how to take care of that.
That's a wonderful story. Paul, what about you? Any interactions?
No, I didn't have any interactions. I mean, I remember the scenes, the dancing around the pool and seeing Mia Farrow there. But I really didn't have, I wasn't close enough. Again, they would just get you up onto that bandstand and then right back to the tent. And that was kind of the drill. I do remember the party scene where it rained. I remember the weather was so bad that week or that 10 days. I mean, it was foggy, it would rain. I can remember some nights going home early because it was just they couldn't film. The weather was too bad. But I have to think that rain scene where everybody comes running into the mansion was because the weather was just so bad. So they figured, well, we might as well just make the weather part of our story. And they rigged up these like a rain machine over the doors. And it wasn't even raining that night, as I remember, but you had to run from outside and through this rain coming down on you into the mansion.
It's incredible. Philip too has talked about his memories of fake rain. It wasn't real rain. It was
Yeah.
put on. But I'm so disappointed that Robert Redford didn't commend you on your musical. He really, he missed an opportunity.
Yeah, well,
So what was it like to be part of a film set that was set in the 1920s, but made in the early 1970s? Did you have to put yourself back in time, or it was just an adventure?
I had to get a haircut because it was 1973 and short men, well, for the period, men had very short hair. And in 1973, we were all trying to have long hair.
Yeah.
So I had to get quite a haircut to be in the movie.
Oh boy, that must have been disappointing. And did you have to be made up every day too?
No. We had the tails, and as I remember, we changed at home. We went to Rosecliff in our tails.
Uh-huh.
And I think they just kind of gave us the once over to make sure everything looked okay, but there was no makeup for us.
Yeah. What about you, Nannie? Did you see the
I don't think
1970s versus 1920s dichotomy?
Well, other than having to have my hair cut and, the curiosities of the cigarette holder and things like that, I did audition to be one of the dancers, and I did work with the professional dancers to learn some of the steps. But, again, in those dance scenes, they are not really filming any of the extras. I mean, we're there, but we're way back, and they're filming these amazing professional dancers. And those dances were new to me. I didn't know the Black Bottom, and I did know the Charleston. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that must have been, I hope you still can repeat those steps today.
No. Maybe a bit of the Charleston, but no, not the others. I mean, it just was so extraordinary to be in that historic house, filming that time. And of course, it made it seem so real in a way that if we'd been on a set or something, it wouldn't have seemed quite so real. And I did have the opportunity to go to Marble House when they were filming the scene with Daisy and Jay dancing in the Marble House. I went with my father, and I was just totally awestruck by the love that I saw in their eyes as they were dancing. And I remember thinking, oh my God, they're having an affair. They are actually in love. And then they had cameras way up high that are filming, looking down and stuff. Anyway, then the director would shout, "Cut!" and they'd break apart, and Robert Redford would begin chewing the gum that he had in the back of his mouth.
Robert Redford is a gum chewer. All
well,
right.
he was in that at that time. And it's a time when he kisses her, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he had gum in his mouth. But, I mean, so professional. And watching them dance in that beautiful, beautiful room was a privilege. It really was.
Paul, you were not ever at Marble House, or did they transfer the band or the orchestra over?
No, everything we did was at Rosecliff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Peter, any recollections on this count?
No, I don't recall him mentioning anything specifically about that.
So I'm curious to know whether prior to, or maybe even during the filming, did anybody from the production crew come in and talk to you about the book or the cultural or literary significance of the Great Gatsby, or, get you in a mood that you would understand what you were trying to portray as an extra? Did you have pep talks of get into part now, folks?
Mhm.
I don't recall that at all.
Yeah, for the orchestra, it was really just, the instruction of like, move to the tempo that the music that you're going to hear is. And it was pretty, it was just pretty matter of factly.
Yeah.
I
And,
did.
and when you watch the film today, it's an extraordinary book because it's filled with anguish. And I think it's a sad book. It's a sad story, but it's a story we all know, especially if we live in Newport. But do you think that the movie captured the spirit of the novel and that era when you compare the book to the movie? And we don't like the Leonard DiCaprio version at all. We only like the Robert Redford, Mia Farrow version, I mean, that's come on, we got to hold together on this one.
Right. I think it's a powerful message, to the novel. And I think that the movie does get that across pretty well, I think. It's very sad when I watch it. My wife and I went to it at the Jane Pickens last year, I think it was, when it, for the 50th anniversary of it. And I hadn't seen it since it came out in it came out in 74. Right?
Yeah.
And it, it's very powerful to me,
Yeah.
I think the 70s film actually captures what I assume was the feel of that era, and certainly the book. I mean, the DiCaprio film contemporized it in a lot of ways, especially music. So,
Right. But how about you, Nannie? Do you have sort of a fondness for the story? For, you got to really have admiration for F. Scott Fitzgerald, not only because of his writing, but his telling of a story that is very poignant and very powerful.
I don't recall having those feelings at that time. I think I only read the Great Gatsby as a summer reading book, not one that we studied in class. So obviously the story is tragic and shows a way that people can just ignore what other people are feeling in such a poignant way. But I don't think at the time I was really aware of it, other than my time in high school reading it.
Right. Yeah. In terms of the interaction between Farrow and Redford and Waterston, now Sam did not have as big a part, but he was still important. Did they seem to be friends or talkative with each other or interacting with each other, or was it work? Or didn't you have enough opportunity to see them all together?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know as I could really comment on that either.
It was so fragmented when you were making it.
Right.
It's like it's hyper focused on certain elements, at least for what I had to do, and the orchestra did. So I couldn't really get a picture of the overall picture of the movie being made.
Right.
Yeah.
Peter, did your husband tell you any stories other than having the lucky opportunity to sit on the floor with the two of them?
it was probably luck and probably circumstance of his own making, I'm sure, knowing him. But no, I really don't recall anything else. I'm sure if he were sitting here with you, he would recall a lot more, because I'm sure he was very engaged with what was going on.
So was there, in terms of the set itself, it's filmed, of course, in Marble House and Rosecliff. Were there any special sets or props or anything particularly impressive about the way any of the rooms were transformed, or was it pretty standard? What you see today is what you saw in the film when it was made.
Oh, the whole patio, where the pool and the patio and the bandstand was built up, like as you're on the patio looking at the water. the bandstand was, well, there was the pool, and then there was a bandstand built up above that. There was quite a lot of, like, I guess you could say, like, construction to transform that patio into like this, where these parties were. I mean, it was so elaborate, the setting.
Oh, that's interesting. So when you walk out onto the terrace, you walk into where the orchestra is playing. Is that right?
Right, the orchestra would be facing back towards the house. So, but
Oh,
I can remember how this is working. Like, there's the big patio there, but there was a pool. There's no pool there now, right?
no, there is a pond,
Yeah, okay.
or what do you call it? Not, it's
Like a fountain, like a,
fountain, excuse me, a
Yeah.
fountain
Right.
with water around the fountain, and then it's
Yeah.
planted.
I can
So-
remember the dancers jumping into that in
Oh, yeah.
party scene as it wore on. You know, they'd be jumping in and dancing in the pool or the fountain.
Fountain.
But the bandstand faced back at the house, so we were playing, looking back at the big doors of the patio.
Oh, now that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
And then all
And
the
then-
party, all of that food I was talking about kind of was down off of the patio and kind of swept around. They were like kind of like catering stations, I guess you could say, and tents with all of the, you know, the liquor and the food. It was pretty impressive.
You know, well, we've had the opportunity to watch a little bit of the Gilded Age be filmed here, the HBO TV show. And some of the rooms have been changed dramatically. And I think the technology is different. You have a scene where you see the Russells walking on the lawn of the elms out towards the ocean. There is no ocean. What they are able to do today,
Yeah.
as opposed to what they might have been able to do before. So just we're coming, unfortunately, one more minute. Did you make friends on set in those few days? I mean, it really is a special moment.
I made some connections with musicians that I ended up working with quite a bit in Newport, and actually in a bunch of the mansions, actually. Through Phil Pelletier and
Mac
Mac
Krupkala.
Krupkala had his orchestra thing going, and yeah.
And
And I
Nannie,
would
I don't know when
say-
your family left. When did you all leave Rhode Island? You might have.
Well, my parents died in 85 and 86. So that's when we stopped going, but I got married in 66. So we would visit often,
Yeah.
but I wasn't there other than visiting. And then when
Peter, did your husband make any friends that lasted beyond the filming?
He didn't specifically mention it, but he did stay in Rhode Island. He's a lifelong Rhode Islander. He was a lifelong Rhode Islander, and he did go on to do extra work in other films. Mr. North, which was filmed, I think, a lot in Bristol.
Yeah.
Brotherhood, and even in the opening episode of A House That Was Done Down at the End Here for This Old House, he and our dog walked by in the first scene.
I wish we had another half hour, another hour. This has been so much fun. I thank you so much. And your memories are so good. You've got good stories. So I appreciate very much. I can't wait for this to get on the air. And thank you all very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nannie. Thank you, Paul. And Kate, who's done the background research, who's listening in the background, and Bill Tavares, who's here. Thank you all. And I hope you get a chance to be in a movie in the future.
thank you for inviting us, Trudy.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.